Today I'm going to be tying up a soft hackle fly. This is a soft hackle pheasant tail. Very similar to your standard pheasant tail nymph, just with a soft hackle collar, kind of like your little spider flies. But it is a very traditional pattern, meaning that it's been around for a long time. It's very productive, good pattern for off-colored water. It's a great trout fly. That's originally what it was tied for, but it's also a wonderful little panfish fly if you happen to be in warm water circles. It's a great little fly for kids if you're going to get them into fishing. Used to take this fly and a number of others like this, tie them to my kids' Snoopy rigs, put a little red and white bobber a couple feet up above it. They cast it out into these little ponds and catch bluegill all afternoon. But this is a fun pattern. It's got a little bit more involved with it, with the thorax and then the actual body. That is the soft hackle pheasant tail, and we'll go ahead and get started. Start our soft hackle pheasant tail by placing our hook in the vise. This is a Mustad 3906B in a size 12. It is a 1X long nymph hook. You could use a 2X streamer hook if you want something with a little bit longer shank to it. After debarbing the hook, I'm going to attach my thread. I'm using an 8/0 uni in a brown. I'm going to attach my thread right behind the eye of the hook. Advance my thread about 1/3 of the way down the hook shank. This is kind of important because that third mark right there delineates between the abdomen on this fly and the thorax and the hackle. This is where I'm going to attach my rib. I'm using a Danville medium copper wire for this rib. But I'm going to turn the hook over and I'm going to attach the rib on either the underside of the hook or right on my side of the hook. It just depends. Sometimes it drifts around to the underside a little bit. I'll explain why in just a moment. Why I'm tying it on the underside versus on my side here. My thread down here at the end of the shank, I'm going to tie in my tail. This is a pheasant tail soft hackle, so we're going to be using some pheasant tail fibers for the tail as well as for the body. I'm going to basically isolate about 6 to 8 fibers from this pheasant tail. Depends on, if it's a larger hook, you're going to want to use a little bit more to help fill in the space a little bit more. If it's a smaller size, say a 16 or so, then maybe you're only using 5 or 6. I'm going to just get those straight out and then peel those off from the tail. I'm going to tie my tail in so that it is about a shank length long. Don't put too many wraps back here because I'm going to be using this as the abdomen and the body on this. So pull that back and I'm going to advance my thread forward. Now you'll see that it's very easy to see where that 1/3 mark is, where I tied in the rib as well as stopped when I attached the thread here. This is important because this is where the abdomen has to end in order to put in the thorax and the hackle. I'm going to bring those fibers around and start to palmer those up. I'm actually bringing these around towards me, which is kind of the opposite way most things are tied in, but you'll see why in just a second. Careful when you're doing this because it's very easy to lose hold of these fibers. They get short on you very quick. Once I have that right up to where my thread is hanging, I'm going to tie that in. Now, take care because of the fact that we wrap this towards us. I can't just wrap like I normally would to tie in materials because those wraps would actually pull that material in the opposite direction it was wrapped on and they would get loose. So I need to go across a couple of times and then in front a couple of times, and then I'm going to do that one more time. That just gives me a nice cross wrap against the material down onto the hook shank, and then it won't come loose. Trim away the excess. Tidy this up a little bit. Now I'll put my rib in. As I mentioned, the rib is secured on the opposite side of the hook or even on the underside. And the reason is if I had secured it right on this side of the hook shank, then when I start to rib this forward, it tends to catch the tail and it tends to push the tail away from the hook, kind of like this right here. You can see that. Try and keep my hand out of the way. See how it's hitting the tail and pushing it out of the way? But because I started further back on the other side of the hook, I can bring this around and that first wrap just goes right at the end of the body. And then I'll proceed and I'll put 5 evenly spaced wraps as I work my way up the body, I should say the abdomen, to where my thread is. Once that is secured, I'll break away the excess. Now I'm going to smooth off this whole area where the thorax is going to be, as well as the hackle. The reason for this is if I tie in this peacock herl and start to wrap it right in this area, if there's too much of a slope or a downgrade on that thread, then each wrap of the peacock herl is going to spread out more, and I won't have a nice smooth thorax area. For my thorax, I'm just using some peacock herl. This is just some strung peacock herl. Nothing fancy. If you happen to have, a whole peacock feather and have some nice herls on it, go ahead and use those. I'm going to take a fairly long one out just because I'm only going to get a few wraps on here, but it gives me more to hold on to as I'm wrapping it in. I'm going to trim away this portion of it here. It's kind of squished and not very good, so I'm just going to trim that away. I'm going to tie this in right where my thread is hanging, and then I'm going to wrap and touching turns forward, securing that in, and also keeping it nice and smooth. My thread's going to end up about half an eye length behind the eye of the hook. Take our peacock herl and start to palmer this in. You have to be careful with this because you have to keep the wraps tight enough so they stay in place and they don't slide around, yet you don't break it. Just keep wrapping each turn, each wrap right in front of the other one. You get up to your thread, you can go ahead and secure that in. 2 or 3 wraps, keeping tension on the thread, you can break that off. So now I have my thorax in place and I have a nice area right up here for a hackle for my collar. I'm using some Hungarian partridge for this. You could use something a little more traditional on a lot of soft hackles, which is the grayer colored feathers. I'm going to go with some of the darker brown mottled feathers right at the base of the neck. Now I don't need all of this feather. Obviously the fluff I don't need. And some of these fibers down here, these are about the right length, right about the middle of the feather. But these I just don't need. They're too much. So I will peel away what I don't need, leaving me about the upper third of the feather or so. At the same time, I'm not going to use all of this. I only need to get about 2 turns of this feather onto the hook. So I'll take my smaller hackle pliers, and I'm going to grip about a third of the way down from the tip. That way, when I stroke these fibers back, this will give me the right length I'm looking for, plus it'll give me just enough for a couple of turns of that collar. I'm going to trim away the tip right here, just leaving a small triangle like this to see if I can get a better angle on that. That little triangle like that is what I will tie the feather in with. Anchoring that down right at the end of the thorax, I'm just going to wrap forward to get the rest of that tip in, nice and secure. Stroking these fibers back, I'm just going to palmer that around. We should give that another shot. Take your time. Even if you lose a grip on the feather like I just did, you just reach up and grab it again. Take your time with it. If you get frustrated, you're going to start getting a little rougher with it, and then you'll break something. There, I get the stem on the side of the hook. I'll sweep all of this back, and then I'll start making the head of the fly working from the eye backwards. Doesn't need to be a big head. On this particular fly, you want the hackles to be sticking out, splayed out a little bit more. You don't want them all laying down flat. The rachis of the feather, I can just pop that right off. And there we have a nice collar of Hungarian partridge on our pheasant tail soft hackle. We'll drop a head cement on both sides. That will soak down in to protect the thread as well as the base of those hackles. And that is a soft hackle pheasant tail. If you want a bushier collar, by all means, use more of the thread so you get another wrap in there, as well as if you want it more sparse, then use less. Again, a real traditional soft hackle pattern. It's been around for a long time. It is just a variation of the regular pheasant tail nymph. If you've ever tied any pheasant tail nymphs, the whole nymph is almost tied exactly as we did, with the exception of the thorax usually has a wing case and some legs sticking out on the side. So this is a little bit different. This is a nice soft hackle. Another one that will be tied in May at the tie-a-thon. Great trout fly, great panfish fly, all around just a lot of fun. Thanks for joining me at the Vise today. I hope you learned at least a new pattern, if not a new technique, maybe a tip or trick here and there. If you have any questions about this fly or any of the techniques used in constructing this pattern, please leave them in the comments section down below. If you go to the trouble to ask a question, I'll go to the trouble to answer it. If you'd like to help dressed irons, please share this video with your friends and anybody you think that might enjoy this pattern. Until next time, remember, it's fly tying. If you're not having fun, then you're doing it wrong.